Welcome back to the Messianic Hour. I'm your host, Rabbi Scott. The show is dedicated to reaching the lost and educating the found. I'm glad you're with us today. We have a special guest from the Holy Land, David Dolan. He is a broadcast journalist, author, and speaker, and we're going to be learning firsthand what's going on in Israel and what the situation is in the Middle East. But, Dave, before we get into this, because I don't want people to miss this, you authored several books, and they're great books over the years. I've read them. But you have a new book out. It's called The Millennium, The Lord Reigns. Tell us a little about that.
Well, Rabbi Scott, I've wanted to do this for a long time. My first novel, called The End of Days, is mainly set, of course, in Israel, and it's mostly Messianic characters, but there's, government officials and others in it as well. And it takes believers in the land through the very last days of history when the Antichrist is reigning and all that's predicted to go on, prophesied to go on in the very final era, the two witnesses. It begins, we were talking in the last segment, almost identical to what we're seeing. It begins with a Hezbollah attack upon Israel. Israel responds. It escalates. Syria gets involved. Chemical weapons are used, and Israel uses a nuclear device against Damascus. This is based on a prophecy in Isaiah 17 that had a partial fulfillment in ancient times with the Assyrians, but Damascus was not totally destroyed, as this says will happen. Isaiah said will happen. Well, this novel takes those characters, same characters, into the millennial reign of the Lord. So I don't just leave them sort of in disaster and fighting for survival and all of those things. Of course, the first novel ends with the Lord's returning, but
Right.
the second novel begins with his return. And, I've lived in Israel for 31 years, Jerusalem for most of that time. I know the city and the country very well. So I take them through the renewed, the rebuilt Jerusalem. And I do believe that the Lord will literally return to the city of Jerusalem. Some have other views of the millennium, but I believe he will. And he'll transform the earth and bring in his good governs. But I point out that, or one of the characters points out, that the Apostle John in the book of Revelation, Yochanan in Hebrew, said that the Lord will rule with a rod of iron. Well, why would he need a rod of iron if it's only saints, redeemed saints and their redeemed bodies on the earth in the millennial reign? Well, Isaiah already told us many centuries before that some humans will apparently survive into that era. And he says if the youth dies before the age of 100, they'll be thought accursed. And so the age span of the humans will go back, apparently, to what it used to be before the flood and that sort of thing. So I take these human characters with the saints governing, but they still have free will. And that's why the need for a strong arm rule from the Lord's government. And there is still rebellion. There is still sin. And so there's fair amount of drama in it as well. And we're told, again in the book of Revelation, that at the end of the Lord's 1,000-year reign, there will be a worldwide rebellion against him by some of these humans that will come up and war. Satan will be released for a short period, it says, and will lead this rebellion against the Lord. So that's all in there. And I think it's a good read. I'm getting really good feedback from people all over the world that are reading it. But especially what people are telling me that I like is that it's made them realize he is coming back. It's going to be tangible. It's going to be real. Jerusalem is going to be the headquarters. And they've said it's enhanced. Many have said it's enhanced their faith and their vision of what it can be like, what it might be like when he does come back. So I'm thrilled. And I tell people what the Left Behind series did in 16 books, I do in 2. So
And
a
now,
little bit a cheaper read.
how can they get copies of it? I definitely want to get a copy. I've read your other books. So how do they get a copy of your book?
Well, you mentioned last segment my website, and that's really the best way. We have a special offer there for those who didn't read the first one. I recommend they read both of them.
Yes,
although
absolutely.
you don't have to. The characters are reintroduced in the new novel. But my website, ddolan.com, ddolan.com. It's available there, and of course there's an electronic version of it as well. A couple of electronic versions for people that prefer that route.
Great. Now, what you're talking about in the book goes right in line with what's going on today. Let's talk about Egypt and Syria. Give us your insight. We got about 5 minutes left in the show. What are you seeing going on there, and what do we need to be watching out for?
Well, I tell you, if we get through this crisis in Syria without a clash with us here in Israel, it will be an amazing thing to me, because the Assad regime, one of the most heavily armed on earth, a deeply entrenched police state, a minority government, the Alawite sect related to Shiite Islam, they're only about 20% of the Syrian population, and they've been ruling for the last, since the early 60s. The father, Hafiz al-Assad, and now the son, Bashar al-Assad, and they're not, as many Israeli analysts have pointed out, they're not just going to walk away because Hillary Clinton and Tony Blair and others are saying, get out of there. They will very likely not leave without trying to take everyone else down with them. And another factor there is Hezbollah. Hezbollah basically is ruling Lebanon, but because the Sunni which is a larger group than the Shiites there, is afraid of Syria. Syria's been backing Hezbollah. So if the Assad regime is gone, Hezbollah's position's threatened. Iran loses its frontline state against Israel. So it's very much in their interest, and Russia loses a long-time client in the Assad regime that owes them a lot of money, but also allows their ships to port on the Mediterranean Sea. So we're very likely going to have a major conflict before this thing is over. Jordan and Turkey backing the rebels, Egypt as well, and the rebels are being led by the Muslim Brotherhood movement in Syria, Sunni Muslims, and other Arab countries as well. So
say that again. The Muslim Brotherhood is supporting the rebels.
They are actually leading the rebellion. They're the largest single force. The opposition there, the rebellion, the revolt, whatever you call it, the Free Syrian Army, they call it, is made up of various groups, but the largest component is the Brotherhood movement that has taken over Egypt and wants to take over Jordan and other places.
And also wants to renounce its treaty with Israel. So even bringing in this rebel group's not necessarily going to be a good thing for the situation in the Middle East, what you're saying.
No, actually, the Israelis have been saying, and I heard this before we went to war against Saddam, I talked about it even then, Saddam was an evil man, but at least they knew him. He was a stable, more or less force. Now we still have chaos in Iraq, and no, the new government in Syria will probably not be any better and probably be worse, because it is more of a fundamentalist Muslim group. Assad was fairly secular, actually, in his approach. And the same with Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. And now that we have Morsi taking over there and the Muslim Brotherhood in charge there, the prospects of a holy war, of a continuation of the jihad and of Hamas being strengthened, etc., much greater under these new governments. So far, democracy is not bringing a better picture to the Middle East, at least as far as Israel's concerned.
We got about just under 2 minutes left. Give us what do you kind of sum up what you're seeing going on in Egypt and Syria? Then what do we need to be watching out for?
Well, Morsi, the new Egyptian president, knows that the military will go ballistic really on him if he were to break the treaty with Israel tomorrow, because they get a $1.3 billion from America every year as a result of that treaty. So he's not going to rashly do that, but what we are already seeing is he's favoring Hamas. He's talking about opening up the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt completely, which would strengthen Hamas. Secretly or quietly, they believe he'll be funneling more arms and this sort of thing. So it's not a good thing for Israel, even if he doesn't formally break the treaty. For all effects, it's bad. Right. And it will strengthen the Muslim Brotherhood movement in Jordan, which is a Hamas affiliate, and they want to see the king overthrown there and a fundamentalist government there, and that's what's happening in Syria. So all in all, as all I can say, Rabbi Scott, is if you know end-time prophecy, you can see the writings on the wall. We're heading towards some really rough waters ahead.
Now, I want to encourage our listening audience. You can go to our website. We have a link to David's on ours, but go to ddolan.com. You can sign up for his newsletter. Great information. You're getting it right from what's going on in the land. I want you to check that out. Remember, also go to RabbiScott.com, sign up for our newsletter. Remember, too, we are a listener-supported show. You can support us right there online, and you can also bless Israel by planting a tree in the land. I want to encourage you to go do that. Until next week, this is Rabbi Scott saying shalom and pray for the peace of Jerusalem.